Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. We often see that when people express unpopular opinions, they are either trolled by individuals or, for that matter, by mobs. We've also seen that in the past few years, cyber crimes, unfortunately so, have been on a constant rise in the Pakistani society, be it in the form of cyber stalking, be it in the form of cyber harassment, blackmailing, or different forms of electronic fraud. And the sad thing is that the COVID-19 pandemic has added to these numbers. Now, a very important question which we must ask in this regard is the fact, has the number of such cases increased per se, or has the reporting of such cases gone up? Has that become more frequent, more common now? Also, in this context, we must consider the fact that what are those societal attitudes, what is that typical mindset that we have in our society today, which either overtly or covertly encourages such crimes, who is most at risk, and what all can we do to curb such crimes. This and much more we're going to be talking about in our today's show. And to do that, let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Ms. Haira Basit, who is a cybercrime expert. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. You're most welcome. And my second panelist for the show today is Ms. Nudrat Mustafa, who's an educationist, a journalist and an analyst. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And my third panelist for the show today is Dr. Saleha Javed, who's a psychologist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Welcome, Salam. Thank you for inviting.
Most welcome. I would like to start the show with you, Haira. I was going through this report of FIA, which very particularly mentioned that in the last few years, the number of complaints of cyber crimes has just doubled. And if we go to the figures, in 2018, the agency said that it received around 4,031 complaints per month. But in 2021, the figure rose to more than 8,000. So as a cybercrime expert, somebody who has that, experience of dealing all such complaints firsthand, what reasons do you attribute to the same?
So in the past year or 2 years, I guess now, we've been going through the COVID pandemic. In the first year, I think we went through a very serious lockdown. So I think that is one factor that's contributed to this, to the rise in cybercrimes, where people couldn't go out, they lost their source of income, there was a very great increase in frustrations, and that frustrations were, I think the source of release was inside the homes and online, because they couldn't go out. So everything went online, right? And crimes that we see in the offline world, they often follow, if we're increasing our use of the digital world, offline crimes will also follow in the online
And
world.
at the end of the day, I think that's a very valid point that you've made, Haira, because at some point or the other, we do understand the fact that they're both interrelated as well. A lot of times we see people who are harassed in real life, like offline that way, they are also, harassed in continuity online as well. So you can't, of course, bifurcate them. But coming to you, Nudrat, when we talk about who is most at risk, who do you feel is most vulnerable on online spaces when we do a general analysis of the Pakistani society? Is it men? Is it women? Is it children?
Since cyber crimes, they are convenient, they are cheaper, because such criminals, they only need a computer, an internet connection, and very few resources beyond them. So I guess if we talk about statistics and all, private companies, government institutions, they are more at risk. Secondly, at second number, women, online harassment through very famous social medias, it's very common. And then third, at the third point, at the third level, children, because they are most vulnerable ones. They can't, they are unable to protect themselves. Otherwise also, we are not talking about only online, but otherwise also. So these are the four sectors which are, by number, they are having a lot of complaints.
And they appear to be most vulnerable in your opinion.
They are.
But moving on, Nudrat, a very important question which arises, from the answer that you just gave is the fact that when we talk about women, we must also make a bifurcation here when it comes to women in media, like myself too at the end of the day. Do you not feel that when it comes to trolling and other such crimes, be it cyber stalking, be it cyber harassment, women journalists are more prone to it as compared to their male counterparts?
I totally agree to that. Not only women journalists, but women who are, accessible to public, they are more vulnerable. be it models, politicians, anchors,
anybody in an
who's-
important position, yes,
Yeah,
or a
they are.
public figure for that matter.
Yes,
And even for that
exactly.
matter, the influencers and the bloggers too,
Yes,
so to
they
speak.
are.
Everybody is
And
complaining
many-
that they are being trolled.
Ah,
And I
and-
think the reasons because of which they are trolled, you might agree with me or disagree with me on this, those are very different, because usually you would see women being trolled on the way they look, maybe on their background,
Yeah.
maybe on the way they carry themselves,
on
rather
their
than
careers, on their careers,
as
Yes,
well,
they are
basically,
trolled
yeah.
on their careers
But
as
it's
well.
more, at least in my experience and from what I have seen, it's more to do with their outward personalities, their
Yes,
appearances, rather
yes.
than their work, rather than their content that way. And that is something, of course, that we need to get rid of. Right now, that your point is noted. But Dr. Saiba, coming to you, I think in this regard, we must also generally talk about the psychological and, of course, the emotional trauma that cybercrime does bring with it. So, in your experience, tell us that mentally, how does it affect, victims?
Actually, the thing is that, when you're going through a cybercrime, the problem is that the spotlight is always on the victim. So victim is under attention, they're asking the victim the questions, the embarrassing questions, the guilt and the shame that these questions bring in within the victim. So the research even says that there is a 70% chance of the victim going through post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
When they're facing these kind of cybercrimes, because you live in a patriarchal society, and we need to understand that the women are more vulnerable to these kind of crimes, cyber crimes, and even if you take children, even female children are more vulnerable to it. So we need to take into consideration they go through post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and these are the things that they are not only facing for the time being, they become part of their personalities. Even after 5 years, they will have flashbacks.
And because at times we see that cybercrime is something which is just not a one-off event. It can be of a continuing nature. So in that regard, I think for doctors like yourself, rather psychologists like yourself, it would be more difficult to treat the patient that way. But I think we must also talk about the mental state of mind of the perpetrators of violence, because when we talk about victims, it's only fair that we also talk about perpetrators. So do you get to treat perpetrators as well? Because we understand the fact, of course, from statistics and otherwise, that a lot of people who actually commit such crimes, they are mentally unsound too. They are not mentally well.
Actually, that's a very good question. We need to bring that on surface. The perpetrators that I attend to, they're the ones that's a very, very small percentage, and it's like the urge, the impulse that they have to commit this crime. They're in a completely different state of mind. And when they have committed the crime, they realize that they have done something wrong. And approaching a psychologist, it requires a lot of guts. It requires a lot of, they need to muster up a lot of courage.
Right.
Because approaching a psychologist, even for a normal person approaching a psychologist in a society like Pakistan, it's a taboo, it's a stigma.
Right, Dr. Saiba. And I think we must also talk about the most recurring or common personality traits that you do see in perpetrators of violence if they do come to you for treatment. So tell us about those.
Okay, the most common personality trait is aggression, and aggression, it stems out from so many reasons. First, if the person was in love with somebody and he didn't get to marry that person, they decide to, they want to go and blackmail, and the cybercrime, it's the easy way out, and not the only, it's the easy way out, it's an excellent medium for them to hide their identity as well.
Right.
So to take revenge. So that also inculcates a lot of aggression. Another is when students or children or young people, they're exposed to so much violence in their home, so they start taking refuge in the world of this screening, virtual world. Exactly.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that as well, but I was more particularly referring to the personality traits of such people, like what are they more prone to be like, what are like the issues that they have, which of course makes them more prone to committing such crimes. Maybe I should rephrase my question that way.
Low self-esteem,
Right.
aggression, lack of exposure, lack of awareness. Then there is introvert personality traits who do not like to share or discuss their problems with other people, and they take it in too much, and to the extent that they start feeling suffocated and congested, and then it converts into a negative energy. And there is a conduct defined disorder, which is mostly in cases genetic as well.
So since I work with children, and I'm really interested to know, do genes also contribute to this psychological problem?
Yes, genetics do play a very, very major and significant role, because when a patient or client comes to me, I always take into consideration their biological background, their social background, and their psychological background. So if there is a person who has this impulse or urge in their family to commit this kind of crime, unethical or immoral crimes, they will, you know, it's at some age, some point of view,
it's natural for them to follow, you know, the footsteps of their parents, seeing them. And I think that's something that's very general
yes,
that way.
but
I think she meant it more in a medical and a biological sense.
But
that, you know,
adding more to that, cybercrime is an excellent tool for these kind of people, because these kind of people, they are not only committing the crime, they are also very manipulative.
Haira, when we talk about your work, I think we must also talk about the fact that, you know, how conducive is the legal environment for people like yourself who want to help people out and who are actually doing that on ground to do that. Because a lot of times we see that people want to be helped, but they complain, you know, that the law is, you know, not helping them out, in the sense that the barriers are very strong or the system is not that enabling. But do you not feel that this is something which has changed over a period of time, considering that we now have PICA, like the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016, and more recently the government has passed the amendments to the Harassment Law, which particularly brings cyber stalking within the domain of harassment?
So PICA, like you said, was introduced in 2016, and cyber stalking is a part of that
exactly.
Bill as well. And recently we've had, like you just mentioned, the Workplace Harassment Law. There have been amendments to it which have increased protection that are available to women, not just women, but
men and transgenders too, exactly, basically.
From all genders.
Anybody can be a victim of cyber harassment or cyber stalking at
and
the end of the day.
So that includes cyber harassment, but all other forms of harassment as well,
Right.
whether you don't have to be restricted to the workplace. It could be formal, informal, or it's even included schools now.
Right.
So that is a very good step forward.
Yes.
With PICA, I think was a very good step in
but there were lacunas there. Now it's more easier for anybody who comes within the definition of workplace harassment, and of course the different contours that have been defined by the law itself, to actually bring up a case, because harassment per se now includes cyber stalking. But moving on, question which is often asked is the fact that, you know, we see in cases of data breach that when such cases happen, we often see that the person is complaining that their data has been compromised and it has been put up in not only one social media forum but several social media forums. So as the organization who's sitting out there to help such a person, how do you tackle this? Because from when I look at it, the whole issue is so fragmented, it's so scattered. Wouldn't it be very difficult for you to help that person out this way?
Yeah, so it's very important to be updated whenever users use these social media platforms. It's very important to go through their privacy guidelines and understand what platform they're using. So you never dive into something without understanding what it is that you're using. So that is one aspect of what we try to do. We try to bring awareness to our complainants who call our helpline, but just through other trainings as well. The other part that we try to do is, at the helpline, we have connections with different social media platforms. The most frequently used platforms are Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. These are the top 3 that we've seen.
And according to a report I was studying, people complain that 23% of, you know, cyber crimes, they actually happen on Facebook as well.
Yeah, because people, it's the most used
commonly
platform,
used
right?
one, exactly.
That and WhatsApp, I think. Instagram is still a third, but Facebook and WhatsApp, you see everyone is using it. And so where everyone is using it, that is also going to be the platform where you see online harassment.
It's going to be, of course, open to more scrutiny that way and open to more abuse as well, basically.
So we have direct escalation channels with these platforms, and whenever, because reporting mechanisms for South Asian countries aren't as efficient, so with these escalation channels, we try to explain to these platforms the social and cultural context.
Right, Haira, your point is noted. But Nuzhat, coming to, I think we must also talk about the fact that, you know, when we talk about freedom of expression, when it comes to journalists, I think the responsibility is more, because when you have that leverage to influence people, you need to exercise this right very pragmatically, very intelligently, very constructively. So how adequately do you feel do Pakistani journalists manage to strike that balance between, at one end, exercising their freedom of expression, at the other end, ensuring that, you know, it is something which is not defamatory to the other person, something which doesn't, you know, violate the other person's privacy, or for that matter, their dignity?
Okay, so there is a very thin line, and we have to be really, really careful about that. There are a few basic things that we need to take care of. The first one is nothing should be against the state or the country. Another one can be nothing should be related to contempt of court, right? We need to take care of these things. We should not be writing anything or speaking
which is
anything
defamatory to anybody, right?
Yeah, and as far as I am concerned, since I have two diverse, backgrounds as an educationist and as a journalist, we are, we are given proper trainings, and we cannot write anything, we cannot put up anybody's picture without his or her consent. Of course, we have to be very objective, we have to be
you have to take the other person's consent.
Yes. So
and even divulging their personal details when you interview them that way, because
of course we have
this
to
is
take their permission.
Exactly, this is an issue which usually crops up with lifestyle journalism.
Yes. So we need to take care of these few things before having this right of freedom of speech.
Right, no, that your point is noted. But Dr. Saba, coming to you, I think we must also talk about this whole debate in the context of families, because a lot of times I've seen that families validate actions of those who actually commit such crimes. So how important is family counseling when it comes to actually curbing cyber crimes?
See, living in a patriarchal society like Pakistan, family support means a lot to a person. Let's take into consideration the whole population at a broad spectrum. I will take it. Let me give you. There are two dangerous trends that I've seen when it comes to cybercrime, and that too in the context of family. I would like to quote one incident of a girl who was beaten in the street, and her friend made her video, and they think that social media is a platform from where they can provoke the public at large, they can get justice somewhere, but that is wrong. This is not the platform where you can get justice. You can express
I think
your
this is unfortunately a trend which we see developing over the years, although the right forum is of course a court of law, but I think social media helps them to the extent that they can make their voices heard, after which they might be listened to more seriously that way. But of course it goes without saying that it is not the relevant forum.
Yes, exactly. But the psychological repercussions that girl has to face was 10 times more that she was physically beaten, because what happened was the spotlight was totally on the victim. She was innocent, naive, and then she was blamed by the family that why she did put up her video on the social media to gain attention, and she has maligned the family, and this has brought a lot of mudslinging to the family.
People who didn't know
exactly
came to know.
And I think this is something which is also generally seen in other parts of the society too, especially when it comes to other crimes as well, be it harassment, assault, not particularly cyber crimes.
Another incident that I would really like to quote over here, we are talking about girls and women being so vulnerable to cybercrime. It's not like that. We cannot underestimate the boys are equally vulnerable to these cybercrimes.
So what is that most impactful kind of an experience that you've come across this way, especially when it comes to men being victims of cybercrimes? Because usually, like you rightly yourself pointed out, it's women and children that we are talking about.
Okay, another, in the capacity of a psychologist, the things that I have noticed among young boys was that these young boys, out of fun, they get them bullied, they get them ragged, they make their videos, and then they start sharing on the social media platform as a fun. But the psychological impact, the psychological effect that is affecting the child, it disturbs them mentally, psychologically. They start having these sleep disturbance patterns. It affects their immune system, and then they start having lower self-esteem. They start cutting them from the social normal life, and then they start taking refuge in the world of games.
Right, Dr. Saba, and I think a very relevant point which you've raised, which I would want to further deliberate upon, is the fact that we generally see these days that a lot of these violence games, they are feeding aggression in the youth in Pakistan today. Just recently we saw this young boy murdering his entire family, and it was later found out that he was addicted to this game which incited violence in him. So keeping such examples in mind, how do you correlate, where do you see the link between playing such games and actually committing such crimes?
Okay, there are two factors, First of all, we need to take into consideration the environmental factors that this boy was living in. His social circle, his relationship with his parents, his relationship with his sisters, how he was in his school. These are the environmental factors that we need to take into consideration. Now, another thing that we need to take into consideration is the social factors, that how he was getting along with his friends. Maybe he was disturbed from their side, and maybe he took, children are like that. They want to cut themselves off from the world, and they just start getting addicted to these games.
Right, but I think in this regard we must also consider countries like Japan, who apparently deemed to have a low violence rate, despite the fact that Japanese kids, they are addicted to such games. But you were saying something else too in that regard.
I wanted to highlight the biological factors as well. These games, they release a certain neurotransmitter in your brain, which you get addicted to it, and the more the neurotransmitter that is released in your brain, the more the desire is to play the game. So there are biological factors to it as well, and
so it's a combination of social factors, environmental factors, as well as biological factors, to which I'll come to you. Nudrat, I think we must also consider this whole argument, this whole conversation today in the context of the role of teachers this way, because we understand that cyberbullying, cyber harassment, cyber stalking is something which just doesn't happen at workplaces. It's something which just doesn't happen at homes. It's something which occurs in schools as well. So what role can teachers and lecturers like yourself play in order to curb the same?
So first and foremost is raising awareness, right? We have to move from be a good neighbor or sharing is caring. From here we have to now move to how one can be responsible cyber citizen. This discussion needs to be there in the class and at a very grassroots level, you can say, from grade 3 onwards, I guess. So this is the first thing. The second thing should be, I think that we now should be able to inculcate in our students that finally it's about time when cyber crimes, cyber bullying will be addressed.
Right, Nudrat, but coming to you, Haira, I think we must also talk about this in the context of inculcating this in the school curriculum, and I think in this regard we have seen that the single national curriculum has incorporated rather life skill based education. So do you not feel that the same should be done for cyber crimes too, so people, rather students, take it seriously?
So generally, when we're talking about education, if we're educating children, school children, about how to use computers, about generally computer-based courses, because cybercrimes are a part of this, it's going to be a part of their future. You give people tools or children tools about how to use platforms, but also how to protect yourself. So you tell kids how to protect yourself outside and in the home. The same is it's the same with computers and the digital world. You give children the tools, the understanding, the awareness of why and how you can protect yourself. So yes, it should generally be added to school curriculums, which is also why DRF conducts these trainings at. We focus specifically on women or females, and we go to schools, we go to colleges and universities, where we teach or we give training to these women or young girls about how they can protect themselves online, what tools they can use, and why it's important, and how they can support each other.
Of course, and why, of course, please do.
That we need to encourage the bystanders also to intervene. A CNN report that I was reading the other day, it stated that 71% of the bystanders, I am talking about cyber crimes right now. So bystanders are the people who are taking your side virtually, right? So 71% of bystanders, they help the victim online. So we need to encourage them as well.
Right, Nudrat, I think you've raised a very valid point here. So tell us about the scope of the training and the awareness sessions that you do have. Is the scope of your training just limited to those who come to you for help, like for example, somebody's account got hacked and they want to now do a digital security session with you, or does it also extend to the general public out there?
So at DRF, what we try to do is, we can't reach everyone. We try our very best, but we can't. We try to do awareness raising through our social media platforms, through TV appearances like this, when we talk about issues like this. But other than that, through our helpline, whenever people do call us, especially from far-flung areas. So we have the bigger cities, but when we get calls from people who, from villages and from
remote areas of
very remote
Pakistan.
areas, rural areas where they barely have access to law enforcement or even internet access.
I think that is rightly put by yourself, Haira, but I think in this regard, wouldn't it be very challenging for you, as people out there helping, people get justice this way, especially when your complainants are those who come to you from rural areas, because when you try to make people from such, less developed areas aware of their rights, you do come across a lot of opposition per se, because these are those people who have that mindset, who feel that, internet is a no-go for women per se.
So when we do these trainings at schools, universities, and even small workplaces, our focus is not just to give them the tools for them to learn how to protect themselves, but also the understanding and awareness that this is something that they shouldn't blame themselves for. If they become victim or a target of cyber crimes, it's not something that they should be ashamed of, that they should shame other people for.
Victim blaming.
Yeah, there should be no victim blaming.
Self-blame themselves.
Exactly,
for this,
because that's not the crime. Becoming a target to this is not the crime. Doing this or targeting someone else is the crime. So we try to remove the shame. We try to make them aware of how they can be more supportive towards other people. The second part of that is when people call us at the helpline, especially from villages, from far-flung areas, from remote areas, we help them, we tell them, we guide them through how they can solve their problem that they bring to us, but also we counsel them as well. We tell them, first of all, we emotionally counsel them. We tell them that it's okay, because they're usually very emotionally upset. They're crying, they're in tears, they're blaming themselves. And so we try to tell them that this is not something that you should blame for, because you haven't done anything wrong. Trusting someone else with, for example, your pictures or talking to someone, that's not a crime. You did nothing wrong. It's them who should be ashamed of what they're doing to you. And so this is how we try to bring the awareness. We also occasionally talk to their support systems around them, so sisters, cousins, friends.
Right, Haira, your point is noted. But coming to Doc Saiba, I think a very important angle which we must not miss is the fact that a lot of times we see that such crimes are of a continuing nature, which of course means that when you have to treat such patients, that in itself has to be a long process, and that has to be continuing too. So doesn't it becoming challenging for you as a psychologist to treat such patients?
Yes, it is becoming really, really challenging, to treat clients like this who have been victim and who have been exposed to this kind of reality in life, because as I earlier mentioned, the spotlight is always on the victim, and the victim feels very isolated, very alone. So another thing that happens to the victim is panic attacks. Every such thing, anything related to it, even it is not associated with the client, it will keep on clicking the same negative, feelings again and again. So
I think this is constant fear of knowing the unknown, and that sense of apprehension and fear.
And then the insecurities that it inculcates, the psychologically threatened the person feels all the time.
So how do you typically, treat such patients? This is exactly why I put this question to you, because for example, let's make this more clear for the audience, that if a girl comes to you and her, personal data has been breached, that has been compromised, and that has been put up on not one, in fact, several social media forums, something which I asked Haira before too. So in that way, this act of cyber crimes, that is continuing, and you don't know when it will end that way. So as a psychologist, how do you treat her? Because then your job is so daunting that way. Will you continue to treat her for years till the time she gets relief and till the time she manages to get all this, stuff down?
Actually, when these kind of clients come now, when their video is surfacing in the air, the first thing is their confidence, their trust is shattered. So I need to build their trust and confidence again, and they need to go and face this reality. The first thing first is that we do go through them imagery techniques, guided imagery techniques, and we help them to restore their self-esteem and self-confidence. And secondly, when everything is done, when I know, and this takes not only 2 to 3 sessions or 14 sessions, it goes up to 28 to 38 sessions.
Right.
And normal
this is exactly why I posed the question, that it must be such a daunting and challenging task for you as a psychologist, because you don't know when the treatment is going to end, because the nature of that crime is continuing. So of course your treatment by virtue of that is continuing as well.
Yes. And another thing is when the person's self-confidence, because the person is losing his or her space in the society to live, especially in a conservative society that you're living in.
And I think in this, the patient themselves, they need to be very steadfast as well. They need to muster up the courage too, and and they of course need to understand the fact that it's okay if this has happened, and they can't blame themselves for it. But Haira, coming towards you and coming towards the conclusion of the show, you know, we've generally been talking about time and again the need to make people aware of their, you know, rights, especially when it comes to using online spaces. There's no denying to the fact that of course awareness is extremely important in this regard, but what about prevention of such crimes? What about the fact that, you know, we need to invest and we need to all, of course, you know, sensitize our law enforcement mechanisms, because at the end of the day all these things go together if you want to curtail such crimes in the society at large.
So like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, cybercrimes will continue or are projected to continue to rise, right? So it's not going to be worth it to wait for these crimes to happen and then introduce laws or implementations where you can curb them or provide protection to people. It's always better to just stay ahead of the game and anticipate all these things and provide protections to people that they can then later on use. Hopefully they won't have
and
to
likely,
use them
you know, as they often say, that prevention is better than cure.
Exactly. So we have laws in place. They might not be the most perfect laws, but we have some laws in place which provide protection to women, children, vulnerable career groups, and vulnerable minorities. We have the workplace harassment law, so we have all these laws in place. Now it's time to implement them. When you have designated law enforcement authorities, it's time to give them the resources for them to be able to do their jobs properly. So we were talking about the FIA before this. They have expanded the number of offices, for example, but there's still the need to provide greater accessibility to other people.
Right.
So not everybody can travel to even smaller cities. Definitely not larger cities.
I think the complaint system that needs to be made more consumer and user friendly that way.
Exactly.
So it's easier for people to reach out basically.
Yeah, so if you have an online system, for example, it's not efficient. They even say it on the website themselves that if you come to us in person at the office, that is the most efficient way to get a complaint to
And I personally feel that there should be more advertisement of, you know, their services, and of course of people like yourself who are working for a good cause, providing people a public services, that you're out there to help people. People just need to, you know, gather that courage and they need to approach you people. Would you agree with her, Nudhat? How do you feel can we sensitize our police, judiciary, prosecutors so that they, you know, implement the laws in true literant spirit?
Each segment of the society needs to, you know, work towards it, be it educators, be it, you know, any other sector. But I think that parents and the government, they have the most, you know, they have most of the responsibility on them. Parents, they need to make their children aware of their rights and responsibilities as cyber citizens. And Fatma, we see a lot of boards, notices, you know, displayed here and there that you are being watched by a camera or no smoking. So why not the government should, I think, add anti-harassment, you know, anti-harassment boards, placards, notices here and there as well.
To the extent of workplace, the law mandates the workplaces to do the same. But I think that's a very valid suggestion. In this regard, in KPK, the UN Women and I think the Ombudsperson, they've also done this public awareness campaign in which they've put up, you know, such information for public display at bus stations.
Apart from that, I think that there should be specified courts. I think you would agree with me. There should be specified courts to deal with cyber crimes as well. I think that's something really important that should be worked upon.
Nudhat, what role can society, be it, you know, parents, be it children, be it media persons like yourself, play when it comes to curbing such crimes? Because I feel that, you know, at the end of the day, this is a social menace. So the society has a very important role in order to, you know, curb the same.
Again, each segment of the society has to work upon it, right? We need to, you know, build cyber safe citizens, right? As parents, as children. Parents have most of the responsibility upon their shoulders, you know, they need to make aware their kids that what are their rights and responsibilities as cyber citizens. Then again, teachers, we need to make this discussion common in our classes. And apart from that, I think that there should be specified courts to deal with cyber crimes. So I think this, if we, unless and until we work as a society, this menace will not be come.
Right, Nudrat. But Dr. Saiba, coming towards you and to conclude the show, what message would you want to give to all the viewers out there who are, subjected to such crimes, cyber crimes, so to speak, and who do want to get psychological help? Why should they feel no shame in approaching psychologists like yourself?
Okay, first of all, my message is to parents and the teachers that be friendly, keep a parental check, and the teachers, they should be friendly enough that if the child is facing any sort of, has become a victim of cybercrime, they should know, okay, I can go and talk to my teacher or to my father or to my mother or sister in the family. So there is a shift in the society, there is a shift due to this technology upgradation, there is a shift in the society. So we also need to start changing our patterns of parenting the child. Secondly, my suggestion is that if you don't feel comfortable with your parents, I think psychology, we need to introduce more school psychologists, more counselors in the school, at college level, at university level as well. And as far as the mental health awareness is concerned, I think media is already playing a very good role in it. And we are, and online counseling sessions have also started. So you can also avail them at a very affordable price.
We need to train the teachers as well and the parents that we need to condemn the behavior, not the child. So this is,
and I think this is something which is common to so many other crimes at the end of the day as well, because I think the focus now needs to shift from victim blaming to perpetrator shaming. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Ms. Haira. Thank you so much, Nudrat, and thank you so much, Dr. Saiba, for being here with us today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about cyber crimes as they do exist in the society today, whereas there is no denying to the fact that, social media can be a fun and a useful way in which we can, learn from others, in which we can interact with others. We must also put it to proper use, and we must ensure that we do not use it in a way which is destructive for others. In the event that anybody is subjected to cyber crimes, they need to understand the fact that it is a problem, it is something which must be addressed accordingly, and it is something which must be reported, because by reporting such crimes, you're not only creating safe online spaces for yourself, you're also doing others a favor by creating safe online spaces for them too. On that note, signing off for today. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.